2025 brings the first edition of a new football tournament that has brought significant debate. Most agree with the idea in principle, but opinions are skewed at the manner in which we arrived at this particular destination. A stepping stone to something greater? Hopefully. A much beloved item on the footballing calendar? We'll see. No, I'm not talking about the Club World Cup, but the Australian Championship, the trophy of which was on display for the very first time to the public as the upside-down boot of Max Migala launched South Melbourne and Preston Lions into a new era of Australian football. How is the excitement building for the competition after the latest curtain raiser? What do we think of the trophy, and what else has to play out before we kick off in October? It's felt like a really, really big day on Sunday afternoon down at Lakeside Stadium. Over 6,000 people in attendance for what we've seen will be, one of the biggest rivalries as we step into this Australian Championship era.
Yeah, we already know this is one of the biggest rivalries, dating back in Australian football, right? What caught me by surprise is this is the first time they played each other in 12 years at Lakeside Stadium, which I thought would have been a bit earlier. So, yeah, a bit shocked by that. But in terms of the overall spectacle, I mean, you mentioned 6,000 fans turning out. Like, this is a fixture that obviously has a lot of heated tension. Both teams obviously don't like each other for different reasons. And, I thought, obviously we'll talk about that bicycle kick, the winner, but I thought Joey Lynch's commentary really summed it up. Just the, oh my God, you just couldn't sum it into words. It was just the perfect summary or recap of, what's to come with this new tournament now starting in September, October. So, yeah, I think for the neutrals as well, it's just really good to see, obviously seeing these rivalries really flourish again, because they've sort of flown under the radar with, the A-League sort of, taking full flight. So hopefully, some of these clubs can really take the spotlight now, which is great.
Yeah, so this is a very old rivalry, Jacob, and for people who maybe not be too aware of the recent history, Preston really fell off in terms of their league standings, and over the last few years, it's been on a really remarkable rise back up the Victorian football pyramid. And the reason why they haven't played each other at Lakeside in so long, number one, South have only played there for a little while, just in terms of their overall history as a football club on the bigger scale. But Preston coming back up through the leagues, this is only their first year back in NPL Victoria. So when we think about the line of these curtain raiser games for the championship, of course, we remember that Australia Cup fixture that was played last year, which was their first competitive meeting between these two clubs in almost a decade, I think it was. And they obviously got a lot of people down to that game. We saw, obviously, the promotion now is given this home away game in the Victorian NPL, the top league in the state, and this is the second one of those. So this is kind of the end of that trilogy as we build up to what is going to be the Australian Championship. And it feels like that's given us a really nice taste of what we can expect later this year.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, it's shown what it can be, right, with these crowds in both fixtures, both this one and that cup fixture, as you mentioned, Lockie. And I think it's a good sign, right? One of the big, I suppose, question marks over the whole championship thing is, where are these fans going to come from when you've got A-League clubs that are already struggling for crowds as is? What's necessarily the draw for some of these clubs that are going to be playing in what is a lesser division? But it's clear that there is that support there, and I think a lot of it is tied to the history, especially of those two clubs and of that fixture. And I think it would be a little bit foolish to expect 6,000 at every single game for the championship, but I think this sort of shows what a good day can look like, right? When you've got two rival teams with good supporter bases that are playing against each other, you can expect a decent crowd. So I think it sort of shows what they can be aiming for, and sort of setting the standard, and this could almost become sort of the Sydney or Melbourne derby of the championship in a way, right? It's that big draw card, it's the big fixture every season that people are looking forward to, and it's quite interesting, the trajectory of the clubs to be able to meet up a couple of times before the championship gets underway. It feels like one of those stories of if the championship hadn't come along, potentially they're going to then miss each other next season if South's form form continues to slide and they then drop down a division. That would have been quite a funny little story as they finally meet up and then South get relegated. But with the championship coming in, we're guaranteed to have this fixture heading forwards, which I think is a great thing because the atmosphere at the games, especially the one at Preston, was everybody was raving about it and how good it was. And this one here, it looked similarly just as awesome, and it was a great game of football too, which helps. So I think it's awesome. Really looking forward to seeing how it goes. I'll be honest, I've been skeptical of the championship for a long time. I really want it to succeed, but there are certain things where I look at it and I just can't understand how it's going to work. But seeing things like this, it sort of gives you that reassurance that, if everybody gets together to sort of get behind it, there isn't necessarily a lot of the infighting that we've come to expect from Australian football. I think all the clubs really want this, obviously, and it's clear the fans want it as well. So, yeah, I think that, moving forwards, there's some really good signs that this could be a successful competition.
As you say, the kind of irony of these two clubs has been that when the 8 inaugural teams from Victoria and New South Wales were announced, there was almost this little question mark over Preston Lions being the one team of those 8 that were not in the top tier of their state football. Yeah. They've obviously, they recruited heavily last season, which earned them their promotion up into NPL, and they've recruited heavily again, which is seeing them kind of fight in the finals positions. But South Melbourne obviously have started off the season horribly and were down in the relegation places, and this win does help them kind of jump away from that kind of scrap a little bit with I think maybe 7 or 8 games to play, something like that in the season. So they're coming towards the end of that, but they look like they're in a reasonable position now. But Christian, I think looking forward to the end of the year, I think it is important to come in, with reasonable expectations. As Jacob says, we're not expecting 6,000 at every game, but especially as we come in with this tournament format, the fact that we're doing the round robin groups and then going into the knockouts, that will help create some scarcity in the fixtures itself. So there's only a few options to kind of go and see your team play, home and away, and those fixtures are going to be, all of them, marquee events. So hopefully the fans will go out for them. And then that'll help get this competition off to a really good start. And then hopefully, if we can get into a full home and away league phase throughout the winter season, then we can build from there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be hiccups along the way, right? You're not going to get a Preston versus South Melbourne every game, and the crowd numbers aren't going to be as great as that fixture, right? So, I guess, looking at it from that angle, you can't really give up hope, right? You have to look at these types of fixtures and say, yes, there is sort of, hope for the future, as Jacob was alluding to before, to give that bit of reassurance that it can work for the long term. And I think that's what we're going to be looking for in these next, year or two to see, is it sustainable? Are the fans going to get on board? Which, look, I'm pretty optimistic. I think they will. And again, it's just going to have to come down to a lot of factors to see whether it can, again, turn into, a home and away format, which a lot of these clubs, if not all of the clubs, wanted in the first place. So I think, obviously different things have to align, but, fixtures like this, Preston and South Melbourne, to have, this type of history on a bigger scale and a bigger stage is just, I think, great for Australian football in general. So, you just hope that, all is well and, you sort of, there's no more backward steps, because we've seen, a lot of those eventuate, at least in the past year or two anyway, with, the plans having to be, ripped up and start all over again. And it's been so frustrating for so many of these ownerships and just the players and the fans in general. So, just hoping that, everyone can sort of hop on board, and it will be fascinating. You touched on a Lockie, you've already got A-League fans there, where you get some A-League fans, attending more of these types of games in the championship. Those are all questions that we're really eager to find out.
Yeah, it's going to be a good test case for sure. What about the goal, Jacob? It's insane. Like for a match that has been set up for this magnitude, and it must be said as well that the relationship between these two clubs is extremely unique. Obviously, they are fierce rivals, and their fans do not like each other, and they want to beat each other. But there is almost this unified sense of purpose behind what they're doing at the moment. And the leaders of both clubs have worked very closely in order to make sure that these 3 games have been events that people want to turn up to. And part of that was the release of the trophy to the public as well. And, the 2 leaders of the club walked out with it and presented it to the crowds before the game. I thought it was a really cool moment. And they've worked symbiotically. And it's a modern relationship of sport where you are competitors, but you need each other to succeed as businesses. And the relationship there is very fascinating. But the fact that it's been built up so much, you rarely ever build something up to that extent and get the moment to pay it all off. And Max Mikola in the 90th minute, Preston went up 1-0 early on, 1-1, then 2-1 for the Mikola bicycle kick to win it for South Melbourne, which again does mean a lot for their season. But just that moment, it's going to be thrown into all the marketing material, all the ads and the videos come later in the year. And it's a really good just kind of moment to bottle up and feel all that emotion in terms of an example of what they want to release with this competition.
Yeah, it's a perfect moment for the perfect game, right? It's like you said, it's very rare to have things come together like that, all at the same time. I think it's tremendous to have seen. Look, okay, not the most aesthetically pleasing bicycle kick of all time. I think we've definitely seen better, but it's still a bicycle kick, which is impressive, regardless of how it looks. And the fact that it was the winning goal right at the death, for a team that's been really struggling this season. They've sacked their coach. They were in a bit of crisis mode. And then it was really, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Lockie, but it was kind of that win against Knights that has almost sort of got them almost back into form a little bit. They're playing a little bit better now, and they've got some results under their belt. So, this I think is another sort of moment that they'll rally behind, and a win over the old rivals with a fantastic goal. It's just gonna give them that push to keep going. And like you said, I think it's the perfect moment to introduce this level of football to the rest of Australia, and it's something that needs to really be a focal point. Is like, this is what it can be, right? It can be these great goals in front of good crowds between two, historic story teams. That's perfect. It's got all the makings of, it feels like a perfect media campaign, but I guess we'll just have to hold out and see what they come up with the Championship and Football Australia. But no, it certainly seems like it's all laid out on a platter for them. And I do find it interesting, like you were mentioning, that dynamic, knowing that you've kind of got to be friendly with each other in so far as you're both fighting for the same thing. You both want this to really work, and you need this rivalry to sort of push both clubs up as well. So yeah, it's kind of interesting to see them being all friendly kind of publicly, right? But then you just know that the two teams have it out for each other. And I think that's kind of nice to see, because for so long in Australian football, we're always talking about people trying to undermine each other, and one person thinks one way and another thinks another way, and they're kind of pulling the sport in different directions. But I think here it sort of shows that there is a bit of a unity even between teams that historically have not liked each other, and I think that's a really good sign. So yeah, it's an interesting dynamic to see play out, especially in just the global theatre of football in terms of rivalries. It's not something that you usually see lots of, but it's kind of a little bit of a Mariners Jets-esque thing where they kind of acknowledge it a little bit, where it's like, this is good for both of us to have this. So yeah, I love it. I thought it was a tremendous goal, an awesome moment. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what this can keep producing, this fixture, and just the Championship moving forwards. I think that the groundwork has been laid, and okay, it's not a full home and away season that everybody was really wanting, but you've got to get it started. And I think that's kind of the point that was reached was, look guys, we've just got to get something out there. But if this is the product that it's going to be, then I think it's going to be entertaining to watch.
Christian, what do you make of the trophy, the design? It's kind of that modern, kind of sleek, slatted build-up. It's a very kind of fancy 21st century kind of design.
I didn't quite mind it, to be honest. Maybe it's just like a reflection of the sort of new generation, or this new path, this new modern way forward for Australian football. Maybe that was the thinking behind the design of the trophy, which Yeah, I mean, it looked great. I don't know about you guys, if you might have gone with something different or a bit more, I don't know, traditional, but I mean, it's better than the toilet seat. Let's sort of get that out of the way. So at least it's not that, that's for sure. At least it's some sort of proper trophy. You can say, okay, that's an actual trophy that people can actually recognise. But no, I don't mind it.
Yeah, I don't know, just maybe it speaks more to the direction the FA want to push this tournament. Obviously, it's something very new, but it already feels steeped in history with obviously, state football and going back to the NSL and what Australian football used to be. So maybe it was an opportunity, I felt, to be a little bit old school in that respect and kind of just hint at that history. But maybe that's not what they want to do. I don't know. Maybe they want to push forward and kind of restart that generation.
I did see one complaint, I think it was on Reddit, where they said, "Well, this is a rubbish trophy because it doesn't look like you could drink a beer out of it."
I thought the exact same thing.
Which I love that. Yeah, that's great. That should be top of the mind if you're making a trophy. Can you get some drink in there that players can drink out of?
Did you see the clip of the Mariners after winning the dub? This is a brilliant brand integration, but the Ninja team, the marketing team, they got them to make a slushy using a Ninja machine and then put the slushy in the championship
That's
cup.
Great.
And they drank out of that in the rooms.
That's class.
Yes, you got to be able to drink out of a trophy, sure.
Yeah.
In terms of what else needs to happen before we kick off in a couple of months' time, there's really two things. Obviously, the first is who gets to play. So we know that South Melbourne and Preston, they're guaranteed their places as part of the 8 inaugural teams that were supposed to be part of this home and away season and will be hopefully into the future as well. And then plus the premiers or the highest ranked teams that aren't part of the inaugural group from each member federation, which includes everyone around the country, excluding the Northern Territory. They're not technically in NPL status, and you also include Northern New South Wales as well, in case you weren't aware. So we're getting 8 teams from there, and then we're putting them all into these groups. The other thing that we have to decide, Christian, is where are we going to watch this tournament? We've already seen that the schedule has been released. There's going to be a marquee fixture on a Friday. There's going to be a marquee fixture on a Saturday. And then the rest of the games are going to be split between 3 and 5 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon. To me, it feels like you can't say that without having some kind of deal in place. Surely it would have been prudent to negotiate with a broadcaster where you were going to play your game. So it feels like maybe something's done behind the scenes. I don't know that. I'm just speculating. But the question is, where is it going to be? SBS is the traditional home of football. Again, kind of the old school Australian NSL theory. That older generation will have very fond memories of SBS. DAZN is going to want to make waves in Australian football. Obviously, a lot of people will be watching the Club World Cup on DAZN at the moment. Do they want a competition like the Australian Championship? Or will it just go to Channel 10 and Paramount like it was probably originally supposed to do before we had this 12-month delay? The broadcast rights for this competition was supposed to be packaged in with the national teams, so the Socceroos and the Matildas as well, and Paramount were always going to be the leaders for that. Where do you think it could go, or where do you think it would be best for it to go?
I mean, if I had a choice, I'd give it to SBS. You guys know my free-to-air status and how important it is to, especially with this older generation, to have such a nostalgic feeling to it, right? It just feels so right to have it back on SBS. I just think it'd be great, but I don't think it will because they've struggled to get tournaments in the past. Like you remember they had an A-League game, I think once a week. I think it was a Saturday and then that sort of didn't last for too long. I know they've got the World Cup rights 2026 for next year. It's on the anti-siphoning list, which is great, but I'm not too sure if they're going to be able to secure the rights because it depends on these other streaming services like DAZN, for example. I think you've got one of these major streaming services now coming into play. They might be able to come in and swoop in and make a statement, right, and say, look, we're the new way forward. We want to stamp our mark on Australian football and maybe secure these rights. They might understand how important this championship is moving forward. So potentially they could be in the mix. I'm sort of leaning towards DAZN. I think they'll secure. I just have a funny feeling that they will. But then again, Channel 10 would probably make sense as well. That's probably where, in the first place, they were sort of planning on the games going to Channel 10 because obviously they've got Paramount Plus and the A-Leagues games there. So it's sort of a pretty smooth transition, isn't it, to sort of lean towards Channel 10. But at least we've got a few options, right? It's not like there's just one streaming service where there's sort of, it's like that's a benefit at least. But yeah, I'm sort of up in arms about or torn about, who's gonna take it. But I'd probably lean towards the Zone if I had to choose.
Of course, Jacob, like you have the other traditional TV broadcasters as well. I think you probably do just flat out rule out Channel 7 and Channel 9 because already got the AFL and the NRL, right? So do they really now need another winter sport? Probably not. But it would make sense for Channel 10 in terms of a programming perspective. And then, as Christian say, you have all these streamers as well.
Yeah, I just hope that it goes to whoever can provide the best benefit for football and the league in general, right? Whether that's financial or accessibility. And I think really, if it's financial, it's probably going to be DAZN would be coming in with the biggest offer, I'd imagine, would have the most money to play around with, all things considered. And SBS probably the best in terms of accessibility. So hopefully one of those two. Christian quite nicely outlined kind of the reasons why. But yeah, I do kind of reiterate that point of it's good to have options now and it not just be set in stone and everybody's angry because it's hidden behind a massive paywall for some reason, or it's this, that, or the other. There's options here, and it does give a little bit of bargaining power, I suppose, to the league and to Football Australia to pick the best option. And just moving forwards, I hope that they do take everything into full consideration and choose what's going to be best moving forwards for football in this country, and whether it is you go with the new player in DAZN and try and test the waters and see what that's going to be like then, for bigger and better things in the future, or if you go with a known quantity, I don't know, but that's way above my pay grade, and there'll be people who'll be taking a long time to make that decision. But yeah, I'm just hopeful that whatever it is going to be a benefit for football. I think it's about the limit of my hopes for this.
Well, I mean, it's a very broad statement, really, because like you said, the argument for the kind of accessibility, maybe SPS, just in terms of the specific target market for this competition, and then you have DAZN, maybe a financial, but then the argument for Channel 10 as well is one of unity. For Australian football, where you have the national teams, you have all these major tournaments, you have the A-Leagues as well. Do you just want to put it on one place in maybe Paramount? Plus, if some games are going behind a paywall, obviously you have 10 play and the regular terrestrial channels as well, if you want to keep all of Australian football in one place as well. It's interesting, it'd be fascinating to see what the final decision is.